My name is Diane, and I'm 57 years old. After 30 years of marriage to Frank, I thought I knew everything about him. When he moved in with his mother to care for her after her hip surgery, I understood. But as weeks turned to months with fewer visits home, something felt wrong. That's when I decided to surprise him with our 7-year-old daughter, Emma. Standing at his mother's front door that day, I never expected what would happen next. Emma peeked through the slightly open door, then tugged gently at my sleeve with a confused look in her eyes. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story unfolds. I've spent my entire adult life helping children as a school counselor. The irony isn't lost on me that I failed to see the signs of trouble in my own family. Frank and I met in college, married at 27, and built what I thought was a solid life together. He became a successful architect, while I dedicated myself to my students and raising Emma, who came later in our marriage when I was 50. Frank always had a close relationship with his mother, Irene. At 84, she was fiercely independent, living alone in the suburban home where Frank grew up about 2 hours from our place. When she fell and broke her hip 3 months ago, the doctor said she'd need someone to help her through recovery. Frank immediately volunteered. "It will just be temporary, Diane," he assured me. "Maybe a month or two until she's back on her feet. I'll come home on weekends." I supported his decision completely. Family takes care of family. That's what we always believed. The first few weeks went according to plan. Frank would drive home Friday evenings, spend time with Emma and me, then head back Sunday nights. Emma would count the days until Daddy returned, making little paper chains to tear off one link each day. But then the weekend visits became shorter. He'd arrive late on Saturday, claiming Irene needed extra help that morning. Then he'd leave early Sunday, saying she couldn't be alone too long. Soon he was only coming home every other weekend. Our phone calls grew shorter too. Frank seemed distracted, often ending conversations abruptly when I heard voices in the background. "Who was that?" I asked once. "Just the TV," he said quickly. "Mom likes it loud." When I suggested bringing Emma to visit, he always had excuses. "Mom's having a bad day." "The house is a mess." "We're going to a doctor's appointment." After 2 months of this pattern, our communication had dwindled to brief text messages and occasional short calls. Emma would ask why Daddy didn't come home anymore, and I found myself making excuses for him. The distance between us grew not just physically, but emotionally. The real breaking point came when Frank missed Emma's school performance. She had practiced her lines for weeks, excited that both parents had promised to attend. I saved him a seat, kept checking the door, but he never showed. His text came just as the curtain rose. "Can't make it. Mom needs me. Tell Emma I'm sorry." I watched our daughter scan the audience repeatedly during her performance, her small face falling when she realized her father wasn't there. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked in a small voice, "Doesn't Daddy love us anymore?" Something inside me snapped. Frank had never been the type to put anything before Emma. Something wasn't right, and I was tired of excuses and evasions. I decided then that instead of waiting for answers, I would go get them myself. "Emma, how would you like to surprise Daddy and Grandma this weekend?" I asked. Her face lit up instantly. "Can we really go see them?" "Yes," I promised. "We'll make it a special surprise." I didn't call Frank to tell him we were coming. After months of deflections, I wanted to see the situation with my own eyes. Looking back, perhaps I already suspected something. But I pushed those thoughts away, telling myself I was being paranoid, that there must be a reasonable explanation for his behavior. Frank and I had 30 years together. We had built a life, raised a daughter. Surely that counted for something. I just never imagined how quickly everything we had built together could crumble. The morning of our surprise visit dawned bright and clear. Emma bounced out of bed with excitement, clutching the handmade card she'd created for her grandmother. "Do you think Grandma will like my drawing?" she asked, showing me the colorful crayon picture of all 4 of us holding hands. "She'll love it." I assured her, feeling a mixture of anticipation and anxiety about the day ahead. I packed carefully, bringing overnight bags in case we stayed. I prepared Frank's favorite lasagna and apple pie, thinking food might ease any potential tension. As I loaded the car, I rehearsed what I would say: that we missed him, that Emma needed her father, that whatever was happening, we could work through it together. Emma chattered happily during the 2-hour drive, making plans for what she would show her father and grandmother. I can read my whole book to Daddy now and show Grandma my new cartwheel. I smiled at her enthusiasm while mentally preparing for every scenario. Maybe Irene really was worse than Frank had let on. Maybe he was just overwhelmed with caregiving responsibilities. Maybe I was making mountains out of molehills. As we turned onto Irene Street, the neighborhood looked peaceful. Modest ranch homes with well-kept yards, sprinklers creating rainbows in the summer air. Irene's house, a small white bungalow with blue shutters and a neatly trimmed rose garden, appeared exactly as I remembered it from previous visits. Except for one thing: an unfamiliar silver sedan parked in the driveway alongside Frank's black SUV. "Whose car is that?" Emma asked, following my gaze. "I'm not sure, honey," I replied, feeling the first real stirring of unease. "Maybe a neighbor or one of Grandma's friends." We parked on the street and walked up the stone path to the front door. I noticed fresh flowers on the porch and new curtains in the window. For someone supposedly struggling with mobility, Irene seemed to be keeping up with home maintenance surprisingly well. I raised my hand to knock but hesitated when I realized the front door was slightly ajar, a summer breeze occasionally pushing it open an inch or two before it swung back. Voices drifted from inside: Frank's familiar baritone, Irene's higher-pitched tone, and another woman's laugh. Before I could decide what to do, Emma darted forward and peeked through the opening. She stood there for a moment, then turned back to me with confusion written across her face. She tugged gently at my sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered, "who's that lady with Grandma and Daddy?" My heart began to race. I leaned forward to look myself, but Emma's next words stopped me cold. "They're all laughing. The lady has her hand on Daddy's shoulder, like you do sometimes." I took a deep breath, my mind racing through possibilities. A neighbor, a relative I hadn't met, a home health aide. "Let's find out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside, Emma's small hand clutched tightly in mine. The house smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon. From the entryway, I could see into the kitchen where 3 people sat around the table, coffee mugs before them, a half-eaten coffee cake in the center. Frank looked relaxed, more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. Irene sat in her wheelchair, but she was gesturing animatedly, nothing like someone needing constant care. And beside them sat a woman about our age, attractive with short auburn hair, her hand casually resting on Frank's shoulder. They were laughing at something Irene had said. None of them had noticed us yet. I stood frozen, taking in the scene that looked so normal, so comfortable, and so completely at odds with what Frank had been telling me. Emma broke the tableau. "Daddy," she called out, dropping my hand and running toward him. 3 heads whipped around in unison. I will never forget the look on Frank's face. Shock, guilt, and something else. Fear. "Emma," he gasped, standing up so quickly he knocked his chair over. "Diane, what are you doing here?" The auburn-haired woman quickly removed her hand from where it had been resting and stood up too, looking uncertainly between Frank and me. Irene, for her part, looked genuinely delighted to see Emma opening her arms for a hug. "My sweet girl, what a wonderful surprise." As Emma hugged her grandmother, the strange woman edged toward the doorway. "I should go," she murmured to Frank. "Susan, wait," Frank said, reaching for her arm, then stopping when he caught my eye. Susan. So the stranger had a name. Emma pulled away from Irene and ran to hug her father. "Daddy, we surprised you. Are you happy to see us?" Frank hugged our daughter mechanically, his eyes never leaving my face. "Of course I am, Princess. I just wasn't expecting you." "That's what makes it a surprise, silly." Emma giggled, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. I found my voice at last. Hello, Frank, Irene. I nodded to each of them, then turned pointedly to the woman still hovering by the doorway. I don't believe we've met. Frank cleared his throat. This is Susan. She's a mom's nurse. The agency sends her to help out. I raised an eyebrow. Really? You never mentioned hiring nursing help. Irene looked confused. Nurse, but Susan isn't. A full-time nurse, Frank interrupted quickly. More of a helper, for when I need to run errands or get some work done. Susan's face flushed red. I should really be going, she said again, reaching for a purse hanging on a chair. Nice to meet you, Diane. And you too, Emma. Emma, while still holding her father's hand, looked up at Susan curiously. If you're Grandma's nurse, why do you have a picture with my daddy on your phone? The room went silent. Susan froze, her face growing even redder. What picture, sweetie? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Emma pointed to the smartphone on the table. I saw it when the phone lit up. Daddy and the lady at a restaurant, they were smiling really big. Frank quickly grabbed the phone and handed it to Susan. Emma must be confused, he said. Susan, I'll walk you out. But Emma wasn't done. Daddy, why don't you come home anymore? Is it because you're friends with the nurse lady now? Out of the mouths of babes. The innocent question hung in the air like a bomb about to detonate. Frank looked panicked. Emma, it's not like that. I've been taking care of Grandma, remember? I looked at Irene, who was watching the scene with growing distress. Irene, how are you feeling these days? Frank told me you're still having a lot of trouble getting around. Irene frowned. Getting around, I've been back on my feet for weeks now. I only use this wheelchair for longer outings. To demonstrate, she pushed herself up from the wheelchair and stood a little shaky, but clearly mobile. Frank told me you can barely get to the bathroom without help, I said, watching my husband's face drain of color. Nonsense. Irene looked genuinely perplexed. I've been cooking my own breakfast for the past month. Frank's been a dear to stay so long, but I keep telling him I'm fine on my own now. Emma, sensing the growing tension, tugged at Frank's hand. Daddy, can I see your room? Do you have any toys here? Frank looked relieved at the distraction. Sure, Princess. It's upstairs, the same room I had growing up. As they headed toward the stairs, I turned to Susan, who was still clutching her purse, looking desperate to escape. So how long have you been Irene's nurse, Susan? She glanced at Frank's retreating back, clearly unsure what to say. I should really let Frank explain. Explain what exactly? I pressed. Before she could answer, Emma's voice called down from upstairs. Mommy, there's lady stuff in Daddy's bathroom like at our house. Seconds later, Frank's phone, still on the kitchen table, lit up with a message. I couldn't help seeing the preview on the screen. Susan, I left my earrings on your nightstand. Miss you already. Frank came downstairs just in time to see me reading the message. Our eyes met, and in that moment, 30 years of marriage collapsed like a house of cards. Diane, I can explain, he began. I think the explanation is pretty clear. I replied, amazed at how calm I sounded when inside I was screaming. Irene looked between us, then at Susan, realization dawning on her face. Frank, what's going on? Is Susan not just your friend? The look of genuine shock on Irene's face told me she hadn't known either. At least I wasn't the only one being deceived. Can we talk privately? Frank asked, glancing nervously between me, his mother, and Susan. I nodded stiffly. Emma, stay with Grandma for a few minutes, okay? Mommy and Daddy need to talk. Emma, sensing the tension, clung to Irene's hand. Are you mad, Mommy? No, sweetie. I lied. Just surprised. Frank led me to the back porch, a small screened area overlooking a garden that needed weeding. Once the door closed behind us, he began talking rapidly. Look, I know how this looks, but it's not what you think. Susan and we met through a caregiver support group. She was looking after her father before he passed. We became friends, that's all. Friends who leave earrings on nightstands? I asked coldly. Frank ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Okay, maybe it became a little more than friendship recently. I've been under so much stress, feeling so unappreciated. Unappreciated, I cut him off. You've been lying to me for months, avoiding coming home, missing your daughter's events, and you feel unappreciated. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Frank insisted. I was confused, lonely. And Susan helped with that confusion, I asked. While I was at home taking care of our daughter alone, making excuses for your absence, Frank had the grace to look ashamed, but only briefly. You've been emotionally distant for years, Diane, always putting your job, your students first. Susan listens to me. I stared at him, the stranger wearing my husband's face. I'm going inside to check on our daughter. When I come back, I want the truth. All of it. I walked back into the house, my mind racing. In the living room, Irene was showing Emma her collection of snow globes, but her eyes were troubled. Susan had disappeared. Emma, can you count how many snow globes Grandma has, and tell me which is your favorite? I asked, buying myself some time. As Emma began counting enthusiastically, I slipped upstairs to Frank's childhood bedroom. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Women's clothes hung alongside Frank's in the closet, 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, a bottle of perfume on the dresser, and on the nightstand, as promised, a pair of small gold hoop earrings. On the bedside table sat Frank's tablet. I shouldn't have touched it, but some instinct made me pick it up. The screen unlocked automatically. He was still using Emma's birthday as his password. The photo gallery opened to reveal dozens of pictures of Frank and Susan together, at restaurants, at a concert, at what looked like a weekend getaway at a beach. The dates on the photos went back 4 months, weeks before Irene's fall. I heard Frank's footsteps on the stairs and quickly set the tablet down, but not before noticing a text message thread open on the screen between Frank and Susan. Frank, Mom fell and needs surgery. This might be the perfect excuse to spend more time together without raising suspicions. Susan won't. Diane want to help too, Frank. I'll make sure she stays away. Say Mom needs stability, and too many people will confuse her. The timestamp was from the day of Irene's accident. Frank appeared in the doorway, his expression hardening when he saw where I was standing. Going through my things, I held up the tablet. How long has this really been going on, Frank? He sighed heavily. A few months. Before your mother's fall? His silence was answer enough. You used your mother's injury as an excuse to be with another woman, I said slowly, the full weight of the betrayal sinking in. You manipulated me, lied to me, kept me away deliberately. It wasn't like that, he protested but weakly. I walked past him to the stairs. I need to talk to Irene. Downstairs, I found Irene alone, Emma having wandered into the kitchen for a snack. Irene looked up at me, with tears in her eyes. Diane, I swear I didn't know, she said immediately. I thought Susan was just a friend helping Frank cope with caretaking. They told me they met in a support group. When did she start coming around? I asked. Almost from the beginning, Irene admitted. But Frank said she was just being kind, volunteering to help. She wiped away a tear. I've been telling him for weeks he should go home more often. I didn't need him here full-time after the first month. I even suggested having you and Emma visit. He told me you weren't up to visitors, I said quietly. Irene looked stricken. That's not true. I've missed Emma terribly. Her expression hardened. And that woman has been sleeping here in my house. I nodded. Irene's face crumpled. My son using me as an excuse to cheat on his wife. I raised him better than that. From the kitchen we heard Emma's voice rise suddenly. Daddy, why is the lady crying? Did you do something bad? Frank's voice low and urgent. No princess grown-ups just have complicated feelings sometimes. Is that lady your girlfriend Tommy at school said his dad has a girlfriend now instead of his mom? I hurried to the kitchen, Irene following more slowly. Susan had returned and was gathering her things, tears streaming down her face. Emma stood watching her small face troubled. Emma, I said firmly, go get your backpack from the car, please. We need to leave soon. But we just got here, she protested. Emma, now. She recognized my no arguments tone and reluctantly headed outside. Frank moved toward me. Diane, don't leave like this. Let's talk more. I think we've talked enough, I replied. I found your messages, Frank. You planned this. You used your mother's injury as an opportunity to be with Susan. Susan looked up sharply. What messages? I turned to her. He suggested using Irene's fall as an excuse to spend more time with you without raising suspicions. His words, not mine. Susan's expression changed. You told me your wife knew you were unhappy, that you were planning to leave anyway. You said your mother needed you as an excuse to ease the transition. Frank looked trapped between us. I can explain. Don't bother. Susan cut him off, grabbing her keys. I'm not interested in being part of this mess anymore. She turned to me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. He told me your marriage was effectively over. As she walked out, Irene wheeled herself forward to face her son. Frank, I cannot believe you would use my injury this way. That you would lie to your wife, neglect your child, and bring your mistress into my home under false pretenses. Frank looked from his mother to me, suddenly realizing he had lost the support of everyone in the room. I made a mistake, he said weakly. Emma came back in with her backpack, her eyes wide and uncertain. Mommy, are we going home now? I looked at my daughter, then at my husband of 30 years. Yes, sweetie, we're going home. The decision to leave was instant and absolute. I gathered our few belongings while Frank alternated between defending himself and begging us to stay. We can work through this, he insisted, following me to the car. 30 years of marriage shouldn't end over one mistake. One mistake. I turned to face him. You've been lying to me for months. You abandoned your daughter emotionally. You used your mother's injury as a cover story. This wasn't one mistake, Frank. This was hundreds of deliberate choices. Emma clung to my side, unusually quiet. When Frank tried to hug her goodbye, she turned away, burying her face against me. Emma, please, he pleaded. I'm still your daddy. I still love you. If you loved us, you wouldn't have a girlfriend and live with Grandma, she said simply with the devastating logic of a child. Frank looked stricken. It's not that simple, Princess. It seems pretty simple to me, I said, helping Emma into the car. As we pulled away, I saw Irene in the doorway, leaning on her walker, her face a mask of disappointment as she watched her son standing alone in the driveway. The first hour of the drive home was silent, except for Emma's occasional sniffles from the back seat. I kept my eyes on the road, afraid that if I let myself feel anything, I'd fall apart completely. Finally, Emma's small voice broke the silence. Mommy, did Daddy stop loving us? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. No, sweetie. Daddy still loves you very much. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices that hurt the people they love. Like when I broke your vase and tried to hide it. Despite everything, and I almost smiled. A little bit like that, but bigger. Way bigger, she agreed solemnly. I couldn't face going home, yet facing our house filled with 30 years of memories. Instead, I pulled into a hotel halfway home. Let's have an adventure tonight, I told Emma, trying to sound upbeat. Like camping, but with TV and room service, she asked, perking up slightly. Exactly like that. I managed to keep it together through dinner in the hotel restaurant, through a bubble bath for Emma, through reading 3 bedtime stories until she finally fell asleep in the unfamiliar bed. Only then, sitting alone in the bathroom with the shower running to mask the sound, did I finally let myself break down. I called my sister Joan, who listened in shocked silence as I poured out the whole sordid story. That absolute bastard, she said when I finished. I'm coming over tomorrow to help you change the locks. I don't even know if I'm ready to think that far ahead, I admitted. Well, I am, Joan said firmly. No one treats my sister and niece this way. That night, watching Emma sleep, I realized that whatever happened next, I would have to be stronger than I'd ever been. Not just for myself, but for her. The next day, we returned to a house that felt both familiar and strange. Frank called repeatedly, but I let the calls go to voicemail. His messages evolved from defensive, "You're overreacting," to self-pitying. "I'm sleeping on Mom's couch now. Are you happy?" to conciliatory, "Please let's just talk." I needed time to think, to process, to plan. Emma needed stability and reassurance. I arranged for her to see the school counselor, ironically, one of my colleagues who helped her express her confusion and anger through drawing. Friends rallied around us once I finally started sharing what had happened. Most were as shocked as I was, but a few exchanged glances that told me they'd suspected something before I did. "You knew?" I asked my friend Laura directly. She looked uncomfortable. Not new exactly, but Frank and Susan were seen together at Riverside Cafe a few times. I thought maybe they were working together or something. That hurt almost as much as the affair itself, the idea that others had seen signs while I remained oblivious. Had I been so wrapped up in work and motherhood that I missed the obvious clues, or had I simply trusted too completely? As the first week passed, I began to notice other things. Credit card statements showing dinners I hadn't attended, weekend work conferences that had never been mentioned in conversations with colleagues, hotel charges in nearby cities. The evidence suggested that what I discovered wasn't a recent development or a one-time mistake. It was a calculated double life. 2 weeks after our disastrous surprise visit, Frank showed up unannounced at our house. I had just returned from taking Emma to school when I found him sitting on the front porch. "We need to talk," he said, standing as I approached. "You should have called first," I replied reluctantly, unlocking the door. "Emma's at school if that's who you're here to see." "I came to see you," he said, following me inside, "and to give you these." He placed a manila envelope on the kitchen counter. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. Divorce papers. "You're filing for divorce?" I asked, surprise momentarily overriding anger. After begging for another chance 2 weeks ago, Frank had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Things have changed. I've been doing a lot of thinking." "In Susan's company, no doubt." He didn't deny it. "Look, this doesn't have to be messy. I've outlined a fair division of assets. I'll provide child support for Emma, of course." I stared at him, this man I'd spent 3 decades with, now a stranger efficiently dismantling our life together. "Just like that 30 years of marriage and you're ready to walk away with your affair partner?" "Susan and I want to make a fresh start," he said, as if discussing a home renovation rather than the destruction of a family. "We never meant to hurt anyone, but now that everything's out in the open, there's no reason to prolong the inevitable." I laughed bitterly. No reason except perhaps a shred of remorse. Some time for your daughter to adjust basic human decency. Frank's expression hardened. "I'm trying to be civil here, Diane. This is happening whether you like it or not. Susan and I are moving in together next month." The speed of it all left me reeling. While I was still processing the betrayal, still helping our daughter understand why her father wasn't coming home, he had already planned his new life. I opened the envelope and scanned the documents, my counselor training helping me maintain outward composure, while inside I was screaming. Then I noticed something odd about the financial disclosures. "What happened to our joint savings account?" I asked. "The balance is much lower than it should be." Frank shrugged. "I had some expenses. Expenses totaling $40,000 in the last 3 months. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I needed to establish some financial independence. "You mean you've been funneling money to a separate account while planning to leave?" I said flatly. His defensive reaction told me I'd hit the mark. "I earned that money. We earned that money," I corrected him. "And a judge will see it as marital assets being hidden before filing for divorce. Not a good look, Frank." For the first time, he looked uncertain. He hadn't expected me to fight back, I realized. He'd expected the same accommodating Diane, who had believed his excuses for months, who had made it easy for him to lead his double life. Something shifted inside me in that moment, a clarity I hadn't felt since finding him with Susan. This marriage had been over long before I walked through Irene's front door. I just hadn't known it yet. Frank had checked out emotionally, financially, parentally. He had methodically planned his exit while using his mother's vulnerability as cover. I set the papers down. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours," I said calmly. "I won't be signing these as they stand. Diane, be reasonable." Reasonable. I cut him off. Would a reasonable person hide marital assets, used their mother's injury as an alibi for an affair, missed their child's school events to be with their lover. Don't talk to me about reasonable Frank. He stood up, anger replacing his earlier confidence. You'll only make this harder on yourself and on Emma. At the mention of our daughter's name, something fierce rose in me. Don't you dare use Emma as a bargaining chip. You lost that right when you chose months with your girlfriend over time with your daughter. After he left, instead of falling apart as I might have 2 weeks earlier, I sprang into action. I called a friend who had gone through a difficult divorce, who recommended her attorney. I made an appointment for the next day. I contacted our bank to flag any large withdrawals. I started documenting everything I could remember about Frank's absence, his lies, the missing money. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a sense of purpose. I couldn't control Frank's behavior or choices, but I could protect myself and Emma. I could ensure that his deception didn't leave us vulnerable financially or legally. When Joan arrived that afternoon to help change the locks, as promised, she found me at the dining room table, surrounded by financial documents. You look different, she observed. More, I don't know, determined. I am, I replied. Frank came by with divorce papers. He and Susan are moving in together. Joan cursed colorfully. That was fast. Are you okay? I considered the question honestly. No, I admitted, but I will be. And more importantly, I'm going to make sure Emma will be too. That evening, my school principal called with unexpected news. The district's lead counselor was taking early retirement, and she wanted to recommend me for the position. It would mean more responsibility, but also better hours and a significant pay increase. I know your timing might not be ideal with everything going on, she said, carefully aware of my situation through office gossip. But I think you'd be perfect for it. A month ago, I might have declined, not wanting to take time away from family duties. Now I didn't hesitate. I'd like to apply. As May turned to June, I found myself busier than ever, but also more focused. The attorney documented Frank's financial deception and his abandonment of family responsibilities. My colleagues rallied around me, covering appointments when I needed time for legal meetings or to be with Emma. Most surprisingly, Irene called one evening. Diane, I owe you an apology, she began. You have nothing to apologize for, I assured her. You were deceived too. Maybe, but I should have seen it. And I should have called you directly when Frank kept making excuses about why you couldn't visit. Her voice hardened. I've asked him to leave my house. I told him I won't be part of his deception anymore. You don't have to choose sides, I said, though her support touched me deeply. I'm not choosing Cinti, Irene replied firmly. I'm choosing right from wrong, and what my son did was wrong. She offered to testify about the timeline of Frank's relationship with Susan, if needed, and to clarify that she hadn't required the constant care he had claimed. I don't want to hurt my son, she said, but I won't help him hurt you and Emma either. As the word spread among our social circle, other unexpected allies emerged. Frank's former colleague admitted he'd seen Frank and Susan together at a hotel during a supposed business trip. Friends confessed they'd been uncomfortable with how close Frank and Susan appeared at community events, but hadn't wanted to cause trouble by mentioning it. Each revelation stung, but also reinforced that I wasn't crazy, wasn't overreacting. The gaslighting that had made me doubt myself for months was exposed for what it was. Through it all, I kept my focus on two things: my daughter's well-being and my own recovery. I started therapy, joined a support group for divorced parents, and gradually began rebuilding the confidence that Frank's betrayal had shattered. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I sat in my attorney's office signing the final divorce papers. The terms were far more favorable than Frank's original offer, reflecting both his financial deception and his effective abandonment of Emma during his months with Susan. Congratulations, my attorney said as I signed the last page. You've handled this with remarkable grace. I wasn't sure grace was the right word for surviving betrayal, but I appreciated the sentiment. Walking out of the office, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. Emma and I had moved to a bright apartment closer to my school. The promotion had come through, giving me both professional satisfaction and financial security. At 7.5, Emma was adjusting well, though she still had moments of sadness about the family we'd lost. "Will you and Daddy ever get back together?" she asked occasionally. "No, sweetie," I would answer honestly. "But we'll always be your parents, even if we're not married anymore." Frank's relationship with Susan had imploded spectacularly about 3 months after they moved in together. As Irene acidly observed, relationships built on lies rarely stand on solid ground. He had called me afterward, suggesting we talk about reconciliation for Emma's sake. I declined politely but firmly. My therapist had helped me understand that healing didn't mean forgetting or pretending the pain never happened. It meant processing it, learning from it, and eventually using it to become stronger. I joined a weekly support group where I met other women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. Their stories helped me realize I wasn't alone, and sometimes my professional training allowed me to offer insights that helped others. Irene and I maintained a relationship much to Frank's dismay. She visited our apartment for Sunday dinners, her mobility continuing to improve. "You're still my family," she told Emma, "and nothing will ever change that." Small pleasures began to return to my life. I rediscovered my love of painting, something I'd abandoned years ago when family and career demanded all my time. Emma and I took weekend trips to the beach, building sandcastles and collecting shells. I went to my first social event without my wedding ring, feeling strangely vulnerable but also free. 1 year to the day after I had stood on Irene's porch, my life forever changing with Emma's innocent tug on my sleeve, I took my daughter for ice cream. "Mom," she asked thoughtfully, licking her chocolate cone, "are you still sad about Daddy?" I considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I'm sad about what happened and how he hurt us, but I'm not sad every day anymore." She nodded wisely. "Me neither. I'm just regular sad sometimes, not big sad like before." "That's how healing works," I told her. "The big sad turns into regular sad, and then one day it's just a memory of being sad. Like a scar instead of a cut." "Exactly like that?" I smiled, amazed as always by her perceptiveness. The journey from that devastating day to where I now stood had been painful beyond words. There had been nights I cried until no tears remained, days when getting out of bed seemed impossible, moments when the unfairness of it all threatened to consume me. But slowly, steadily, I had rebuilt my life, our life, from the ashes of betrayal. What I learned through this ordeal was that betrayal says far more about the betrayer than the betrayed. Frank's choices reflected his character, not my worth. The most important relationship in life is the one we have with ourselves. And by rediscovering mine, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. Today, I stand on my own head held high, teaching my daughter by example that her value doesn't depend on someone else's ability to see it. That sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come disguised as painful endings. That we are far stronger than we know, until being strong is the only choice we have. If you're facing a similar journey, remember this. The path through betrayal isn't a straight line, but a winding road with unexpected turns. Some days, you'll move backward before moving forward again. But with each step, however small, you're reclaiming your power, your joy, your life. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What helped you find your strength? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe and like this video. Your support means everything as we navigate life's challenges together. Remember, the end of one chapter is just the beginning of another, and you get to write the next one on your own terms.